Hi, I'm Kalyan Karmakar, and welcome to Foodie Chat by Kalyan. It's this is like a very special episode. It's not that always I have a chat with a Nobel Prize winner in my timesheet, but today I have, and also a very fabulous creative illustrator, and from across the sea. So a very different style from what we are used to, and it's interesting because we are actually going to talk about food, but let's see whom we're going to speak to. So we're going to speak to Mr. Abhijit Banerjee, and I was asking him, should I call you Mr. Banerjee? Should I call you Abhijit Da? Should I call you Abhijit? And he said, well, I've been living in the US for a while. Abhijit is fine. But since we both come from Calcutta and the same college, Presidency, I will call him Abhijit Da. And I should have introduced the lady first, of course. So she's Cheyenne Olivia, and if I've got the pronunciation right, and they have just written and done this fabulous book together. Um, yeah, so we're going to find out a bit like that. So you must be wondering that what's a food writer doing? Talking to an economist about his book. Well, it's actually called "Cooking to Save Your Life," and it's on food. So, Upajita, how did that happen? Because when you won your Nobel Nobel in 2019 and everything, it's always been about economics. So, how did the food?
You know, I mean, I assume no one actually does anything full time. So for me, relaxation is cooking. So I cook every day. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I literally cook every day, 3 dishes. So it's not, and it's just what I do when I come home from work. So it's something that it's my way of decompressing from a day at work.
But what I found interesting is that he wrote in the book that you've been cooking from the age of 15. Because sometimes people have this conception that, okay, when you go abroad and when you're in the first world, then you don't have the radhunis or the, cooking buys and all of that, the ladies who might be there to work for you, or even guys. Like my dad, for example, he was an orthopedic surgeon. And he had told me, I mean, I lost him when I was 9.5, but I still have a lot of endearing memories of him. And he said that when he went to the UK to study medicine, then he said that they had to cook because otherwise they couldn't survive. They couldn't afford this thing. But for you, if you given that you started cooking at 15 and in Kolkata, tell us a bit about that.
Well, my mother, unusually for that time, my mother was very much involved in both as an academic, but also as a feminist activist. And so she would travel, and this was a period where kind of the world feminist movement was ramping up. So she would travel a lot, go away for a month or two here and there. And so we were a bit left to our devices, or specifically to our cook, and who was a very good cook, but he made a very small number of dishes. And so if I wanted to reproduce the kinds of things my mother cooked, which were often roasts and things like that, it was either me or nothing. And so I figured it better be me.
That's very interesting. And for people who are all looking at basking in shared glory, well, his mother is a Maharashtrian and from Mumbai. So I'm going to claim a bit of that shared glory as well, because Mumbai has been my home for 20 years. And it's very interesting that you brought up this problem, because just before we started the meeting, I was waving to this, someone you couldn't see. So it's our cook, Kalpana Tai, whom I call Katie Cook, and Katie cooks. And she's very keen to show how she can make pesto and hummus and Thai green curry. Well, that's bad enough for you. But yesterday when I was speaking to my mom, who's right now in Delhi with my grandpa, she was complaining about how the cook made a sludge of the pachmeshali tarkari. And the previous day, my Didu, who's 92 and just given up cooking duties, said that how the cook put methi and pepe, which he shouldn't. But anyway, this is about your book. And what I found very interesting, and I'm going to go straight since Cheyenne is here, is that this is what happens when perhaps a different perspective comes in. Maybe when a food writer writes about economics, it'll be different as well. Is that like the illustrations, like it's all it's illustrations. I mean, so to be specific, I mean, and it's really it's very European. It reminds me of the French books, or even a bit of Vida, if you remember the Russian books which used to be sold outside the puja pandals. While food so much is about photography and this that, and the plating and styling, and they're experts at that. People in India who are doing fabulous work. So how come Sharon, you decided to do a food book without any food photographs or any photographs? I think even your author photograph is not there as well. So but it's a very different dynamic that you brought in. So would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I think it's a reactions to the photographs, to the overwhelming presence of shiny and very sexy photographs that you find in cookbook, but are very intimidating, even for me. I rarely read cookbooks. This is also a way to make cookbooks approachable for me. And it's also that often a photograph will tell you what you should do, what you should land on, and therefore you stress about is it looking the same way? Is it the right color? Is it the right ingredient? And then you start from the wrong point. While having an illustration really brings somehow an ideal vision that you, in any case, you can't reach. So you might as well do with what you have in front of you. And also you are showing the illustrations that show the hands working, the eyes looking at the color, the nose smelling. You should also trust whatever, with your own senses, whatever you have in front of you. So that's very much about making cooking something that's not intimidating.
That's a beautiful thought, and what you said right at the end, that cooking shouldn't be intimidating, because sometimes recipes become that, especially for people who look at baking, where there's this entire thing about it. It has to be very measured. Because when I was going through the recipes, both text as well as the copy as well as the art, it was in a way like you've given a lot of freedom to the reader. Though with in the introduction you said that trust the instructions and you'll be well. You'll do well. But actually, you've left a lot of, which is a bit different from the sort of education which we'd grown up in, which was learning by rote, or mukhe bidda, or dates. History is all about dates. Is this a bit of an influence of your going out of the pond?
It's to make cooking something that is playful. You have a set of rules, and you have to find your own way to get through that without going on the extremely creative, without borders style, which can be very intimidating, and therefore you would not engage with it, or just very passively follow a set of quite dry instructions. There you have the recipe that is quite simple and good, reliable ground that you can then tweak and adjust to your guests, to your environment, your own tools, your ingredients, your mood that particular day, your taste for salt. So to make cooking something that's that you can actually integrate into your life, rather than putting your life aside for cooking something that you in any case would not take pleasure to do.
Yeah, it's almost like you're talking about Eastern philosophy, because if you look at the broad, the cooking sort of schools, it's considered that European cooking, especially which is centered around French cuisine, is so much about the 4 basic sauces and sticking to this thing. While Indian cooking is what about it's in our fingers, and it's in our blood, and what the grandmoms do and stuff like that. It's all about creativity and not consistency. And I found that, Obita, even in the way you've described the recipes, I mean, instead of going into ounce metrics and so on, You've used, I think pinky seems to be one of your favorite terms. I think maybe a lot of enitlighten or something, or the ginger should be as much as that of a thumb, unless it's gigantic. Was this purposive? Because you've also referred to cookbooks which you've used yourself, especially the Italian one, in your cooking. So is this a response to the cookbooks you've gone through? Is this like a statement you're
Not
making?
so much. Not so much as much as a response. Well, it's a response to the, yeah, I guess it is a response to being not so much to the cookbook as much as the interaction of the cookbook and the kitchen. So when you are cooking, and I mean, the general sense of this book is this is cooking for, you know, for people who live real lives, you know, where, you know, they have children running around and, you know, complaining, and, you so the amount of mental focus that you are allowed is limited. And I think for me, it's always limited. I'm always paying attention to how the children are doing, what's happening. Are we, you know, there are 5 other conversations going on sometimes. And so and I think with that, the measurement gets to be really, you know, what did I do with my exact tablespoon, you know, can I use any spoon? So there is a sense in which I wanted to take us out of that context of, you know, perfectly equipped kitchen where I'm going to start with everything laid out and then you do step by step by step. That's not how it actually works. You'll have to do something. Oh, I was going to press the garlic, but I haven't done it yet. So, you know, it's all of that. So in a sense, and at that point, do I have a millimeter scale to measure the garlic? So I wanted to avoid that sense of panic. Which is normal if you are, you know, if you have a normal life. If you have a, you know, fully equipped kitchen and, you know, no encumbrances, everybody else has been sent away, then you can organize everything. That's sort of the TV cooking, which seems to me to be what's unrealistic about is precisely that it's not, that's not how life happens. At least not my life, maybe somebody else's life.
No, but that's so true. In fact, I think that's one of the things which had led to the growth of social media in its early forms, like blogging and all of that, when it was very much an amateur sport, like the Olympics, you know, at once upon a time, which was all about real people cooking. Before now, even social media has become so manicured. In fact, which brought me to the question I was about to ask, because you spoke a bit about people leading real lives. So who is the target audience of this book? Is it, I mean, I'll leave it to you. Like, who's the target audience of?
So I mean, it's the book is not cheap, and, you know, and it has a international flavor. So it's you know, in India, it's upper middle class people, and maybe if we ever get an US edition, it will be for younger people, or younger urban people, not necessarily upper middle class, but younger urban people. So it's a particular, you know, a quite specific group in that sense, and you know, I don't love that necessarily, but it's also the case that I don't imagine for a lot of people buying a 600 rupee cookbook and then cooking from it is going to be their priority, and I understand why.
In fact, you've been quite candid about it, because in the introduction, you've spoken about how economics, and I didn't know that it was about making the best of what's around you, and that's so much about our cooking, especially during the lockdown, or, you know, when one had started off. But I think you're quite candid, where you said that in real life you can afford to be fairly extravagant. So and which is true. Like I mean, if one is a 20-year-old just out of college, 18-year-old on Instagram, what they'll do is different from yours. But Shayan, I wanted to ask you about this experience of you know, designing largely for in right now in the beginning, a very subcontinental audience, and you know, it's an English speaking audience, but pretty far off. So did you have to change the way you would normally approach it if you're doing it, say, for the French or European market when you work for this, or could you be yourself?
I could definitely be myself because I use precisely this very very geometrical aesthetic, precisely because I feel it's quite international. It's quite abstract, and therefore you can also project a lot of imagination into it. It's not tied to.
I'll be back in a minute.
Sure.
It's not tied to a particular aesthetic or a particular country. And then the advantage, the huge advantage I had in that is that I actually lived with Abhijit and Esther for 3 years. So I got to first eat and then cook most of the dishes. So I had a quite accurate visual on most of them. The most challenging chapter was the meat chapter because I'm a vegetarian.
Okay.
So I actually had to Google many of the. So it was less difficult to think of an international audience. What was more challenging was the kind of food, given my preferences. But we received many. I've been to India many times. I've eaten and loved eating in India many times. So that was not so much of a challenge.
Yeah, and that's really the. I will show the cooking lady at the back.
It's not lady, that's me.
Oh. Okay, I'm sorry. That's sexist of me to think of pink.
I do wear a lot of. I do wear a lot of colors like that.
I like the jammies. But it was a bit sexist of me. And considering that I do a podcast where I speak to women in the food industry every week, I'm going to be. In fact, I'm recording some of this afternoon. But I must really sort of compliment you on the design because, like you said, it really sort of opens a map in your mind where it's up to you to decide which path to take, because often when you're looking at pictures, then you're measuring it with that, and the sad truth is that in India very few cookbooks really have good quality photographs compared to what one gets abroad. Like even when one looks at Indian cookbooks written abroad, and then in India it's really poor. So I think that this is really wonderful. But there was an interesting point which you brought on vegetarian and non-vegetarian. So there was a question which I had in mind. And before that, I must tell people that this book is not just about Indian recipes. In fact, I would say that perhaps 30%, I'm just doing a back of the envelope calculation, would be Indian per se. I think it's sort of reflective of your life, right? But like even if you'd stayed back in India, perhaps your cooking might have been a bit like this, because it's not that we are always having our own cuisines. Would you sort of feel that this in a way sums up your life's journey?
Yeah, it reflects very much how I actually cook, and it has often. I mean, I very, very, very greedy. So I imagine when I read a recipe, I imagine what it would taste like, and then I'll send it to Cheyenne and say, is this worth trying? And
Yeah.
and I sort of like her judgment. The right potential weaknesses in it or something, and then I imagine it quite vividly, and then it's a matter of so it's more like some things stick, and it's not it doesn't come out of a I like this country's style. It's more out of that combination of ingredients. I can imagine what it would be. It's going to be great. That's sort of my usual reaction. Is a set of ingredients, and that's going to go very well together. And I hadn't imagined them together, but it's going to be superb. So it's that sort of gets me excited usually. And so that means that it could be Persian, it could be Turkish, it could be Mexican, it could be Chinese, and I cook all of those basically. The book is actually relatively narrow in terms of, within the range of things I cook. This actually I left out a lot of the things I cook.
It simplifies a lot the buying choices. You can buy a very good red pepper that you can stir fry in a Thai way, and then you can also then put it in an Indian dish, but also then using it in a French
salad
dish, in a salad. Or it's also that's how we thought about when we go to the market. We think about one or two ingredients, and then how we can use them in different ways during the week to also have different influences.
Yeah,
I think that's a brilliant idea, because I'm thinking of it from the other side, that even in India, like, families are becoming increasingly nuclear. So unlike in the olden days, like if you buy like a minimum portion of something, you won't cook an entire dish with it because it'll become too much. So then what do you do with the rest of the, say red bell pepper, or the rest of the ilish or the rui and stuff like that? So okay, you can do Chinese one day, you can do Marathi one day. So that's interesting. And I caught on to this because I was wondering about this particular issue, and I think I might have found an answer in what you just said, Obida, because you said that when you look at a recipe, you start imagining how it's going to translate into a dish, and that makes you drool in a sense. Because what I was also wondering,
in a very specific sense, I do.
in a very specific sense. So maybe that because I was just wondering that I mean, when you did write a book on food, then why was it not so much, say, on the sociology, economy, travel, culture of food? I mean, why is it specifically a cookbook? And this is an out and out cookbook, folks. I mean, this is full value for money if you're looking for recipes, because there might be a total of 10 pages of copy, which is introduction to each of the sections, like hors d'oeuvre, soup, pasta, mains, dessert, or whatever. And rest of it is recipe. Each of them starts with a very interesting scenario of 10, 12 lines of, just a little bit of short story over there, and then the recipe. So my question to you is that why a recipe book per se? Because someone like me, and I'll be honest here, that I find recipe books a bit limiting, because when I want to lie down and read a book, I would like to read about eating in a particular place, or the history of the food, or the sociology of the food, without being too boring, But so why a recipe book?
Oh, I don't think I'm the right person to write the book. I'm not enough of a food historian. I'm not enough of a food sociologist. We have written about food in our first book, Poor Economic. Esther and I wrote about food and the role it plays in the lives of poor people. And I know food very much from that side. From this, if you don't count the actual cooking part, then the only other way I know food is very much from the side of being an economist who studies poverty. And I know a lot of details on that, and what happens if you do this or that. That's how do you improve nutrition, this kind of thing I've been studying for many, many years. But that wasn't what, that we have written about that actually in our book. So it's not that I'm not interested in it. I think it's very interesting, but so this was a recipe book because it started from recipes. I started writing recipes for my brother-in-law who wanted the recipes. And then I had them, and I thought, well, I showed it to some people, and they said, they're fun and nice. So I mean, I wasn't confident that I would be able to turn it into a book till recently, but then at some point I talked to Chiki, and she was encouraging, and then I talked to Cheyenne, and she was encouraging and offered to participate in this really important way. And so that's how it evolved. I wouldn't have tried to write a book about eating. I think I just am not enough. I'm not sophisticated enough in the food history and culture to really do that.
But I think it got denser from what it was originally in, and that's also what's in the book itself, is that range of topic between the very particular social situation and quite fun situations that really provide a chunk of narrative, to the introduction of each chapter, which bring in a more economic global perspective. And we also wanted to bring those two extremes.
No, in fact, that's a very good point, which you may share, and I was thinking of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to just open this at random to show a couple of examples, and then I have a couple of questions on the introductions, which leads to that. So okay, so now first introduction to the recipes which Sharon was talking about, which, like she said, is a bit of a fun element to it, and then the introduction to the chapters, where the Abhijit Banerjee, the Nobel Prize winner, comes in, because also these are two different styles of writing. I mean, it's in cricket. If you're a test match batsman, you'll appeal to a different generation versus the T20, not generation, but maybe audience. Okay, wilted spinach salad. Here is another salad that can be your entire meal. It is also one which is best assembled in secrecy. Why secrecy? If you're serving it to guests, have it ready to dress before your guests arrive. And when it is time to serve, have your partner or co-conspirator distract the guests while you finish the dressing. Unless they're the kind of people, all too rare these days, who don't mind the amount of oil and fat that goes into it. I can still recall the look of poorly disguised horror in the eyes of our guest, a thin and beautiful Italian woman, we wonder whom, when I proceeded to pour nearly half a cup of hot oil into the salad bowl. So, guys, I must tell you that you saw me doing this, right? Because I've read the book, but I just picked up a page at random, and most of it, this is reflective of so it's like, when you used to buy rice in the olden days, and you dip your fingers in and pick it up, and you got an idea. Now, contrast this with, there are two sections which I want to talk about. We are sort of running short of time. I mean, it's the internet, we can talk as long, but there are at least two Bengalis in this conversation and one French national, and we all love our food, so it's also coming close to lunchtime.
And talking about food.
No, so there are two parts. One is the meat and vegetarian part, actually, and actually Sharon was speaking about her being a vegetarian, and there's something which you said which really sort of resonates with what I also feel on the subject. But I think that so I'm just reading a bit from what he's written. So this is the section on vegetables. So so here he's written that in the US I often get asked, "You're vegetarian, aren't you?" And I usually respond, "Not in the least," perhaps with more vehemence than that rather innocent question warrants. The fact is that most Indians, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4, and this may be an underestimate, more on that later, will eat meat or fish on occasion. So I could completely visualize this because occasionally when we've traveled abroad, and if we are ever on a day when we are on a tour together with someone like at Cappadocia or whatever, they say, "Oh, Indian, vegetarian." And my wife is Parsi, I'm Bengali. So he says, you dare say that, and we're not paying. So, but there's a very important point which you brought up, Avida, which is the definition of vegetarian and non-vegetarian. Because there's something which connects India, Thailand, the kaiseki meals of Japan, even Middle East, and something to that if you look at, say, a Bengali meal, if I take that as an example, and you refer to that, maybe 20% of a meal is the non-vegetarian part, the meat or fish, and the rest 80%. So would you like to talk a bit about this definition of vegetarian, the way the East sees it and the way the West sees it? Because there are a lot of political ramifications now, which I think is rather silly to judge people on the basis of what they eat.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. And in some ways, I think maybe if you had to ask me what the one grand purpose of writing a book, you asked that a bit before, and I didn't really properly answer it, is that I think there's while, as you say, it's mostly recipes, and there's an attempt to, through the introductions, is to create a certain, lightness of touch. So let's not be pompous about it, but also let's not lose track of there are important issues around. Yes. So I think we want to walk that we're trying to, between the two of us, we're trying to walk that line. It's a rather delicate line, because on one side you could be highfalutin and pompous. On the other side, you could be responsible. You could, let's just whatever, eat steak. And I think both of us, I think we have a very, I think we both feel, and very uncomfortable with. Even though Shane is a vegetarian, she actually grew up vegetarian. She's not ideological. She will eat. She was in a village in West Bengal recently, like a couple of days ago, or 4 days ago, and they served her in the village. They served her fish, and she ate all of it without even any demurring at all. So I think it's quite, and that's actually something that makes us function well together, because I think we in a sense, we see the world as being so in the same way. And I think the book is meant to partly create those conversations, not in a very highfalutin theory way, but in a fun context. So the recipes, in a sense, are useful partly because they provide that fun context. They're really not so, they're real and they're not theoretical. You could just ignore all the other stuff and do them, or you could read it a little bit and get some sense of, how these things are connected. And I think the key point on this vegetarianism question is that I think by making this a confrontational issue, we are losing track of, I think, one of the great ideas of India and Southeast Asia, and actually of the East, which is that the meal doesn't have to be defined by, and even in Italy, you have minestrone. Minestrone has tiny bit of meat, a quarter pound of that's 100 grams of fat back or pancetta or something, but that's 100 grams and nothing else. And then the whole thing is just thyme and vegetables. And I think that idea that basically a little bit of meat or fish or dried shrimp or fish sauce will just makes the vegetables pop. And I think that idea that you are really using them for just as a flavoring agent. I mean, we have there's a few Bengali recipes there. There's a laudia mangsho and a mangsher jhol, and they're both very much sort of, there's a meat, but there's a lot of the vegetable is like absolutely central. That's how we used to eat. We used to eat, we'll get 2 little pieces of meat.
Exactly.
And a whole bunch, and a delicious potato that's absorbed all the flavors of the meat. And the potato was much.
We don't even think of potatoes as a vegetable.
But I think speaking for the West, at least I grew up in the Basque Country, which is between France and Spain, where people really can eat cold cuts 3 times a day. And when I say that I'm vegetarian, they ask, then what do you eat actually? So I think in that context, or in the US context where people eat way too much, then you have to, as a vegetarian, but as a quite cool vegetarian, you have to become ideological. Otherwise people react to, so then you yourself have to be quite extreme about it. And that I don't think will bring more people into eating less meat and be a bit more relaxed.
Going back to the Wagyu, I mean, it's just small amounts of meat are delicious. We don't need to eat more, but they're incredibly satisfying. We don't have to fight the battle. If everybody cut their meat consumption by 80%, but ate high quality meat and use them in the right way, use them in combination with vegetables, and a tagliata, which is one of the meaty dishes we have. I can make tagliata for 10 people with 2 steaks and lots of wonderful tomatoes and some very nice spicy arugula and olive oil and lemon peel. You end up with something wonderful, but you have a total of maybe 500-600 grams of meat, and you can feed 10 people on it. And I have fed 10 people on it. So it is, but that idea is, I think, critical to emphasize that this is not about meat versus no meat. Even the environmental questions are really about quantity, about quality, about not insisting that you yeah, about thinking about it, being thoughtful about it, not necessarily. Also, in one of the things growing up was, which is nothing to do with meat, important is we ate whatever grew in the season. And I
Exactly.
see that in France even now, but not in the US. US, you get everything the same at all seasons pretty much. The quality is often dismal, and
Yes.
because it comes from very far away, it's dead already. And it's much nicer to have food that's, you cook what's available now. You go to the market, you see what's available, you cook it, and that also makes it much more sustainable. It's much more sustainable if you're cooking what's currently being produced, and if you don't eat it, will be wasted, than getting it from somewhere else.
But I think
Yeah,
what
like
it takes
the
also
Fulgopi
to,
shingara, when the food, the shingara, the samosa in Calcutta, which with cauliflowers, which you get only in winter. But
Yeah.
tomato was only a winter thing. Sorry, I cut you, Shane. You were saying
No,
something.
I think what it takes to balance that, and what you bring in the dal section, is that then you also have to make vegetables or other forms of vegetable protein a bit more attractive, and to also bring people into thinking that it's not just some distant, tasteless accompaniment of some climax
Yeah.
points, and then you realize
punishment.
that you can actually have a very simple dal that is extremely flavorful, and I think that's also a way to balance.
That's true. I mean, so many of us have grown up with like dal or vegetables such as the lauki or bitter gourd or bottle gourd and all of that being like punishment meals. The Sunday meal with those 2 pieces of mutton or the 1 piece of chicken is what you're going to look after. But I really like the point which you made, because as academics and like you have a perspective which is very, very different from say what most people would have. But in the way of writing and as well as the sort of illustrations which you've done, you've made the book very, very warm and approachable, which therefore sort of connects with more people. And then in a very soft way, you've made your point, and the chances are that, over here one will sit and read and then think of it. But I mean, not everyone will read Poe Economics or Das Kapital or whatever. But so I just wanted to refer to one more chapter or section, which was also very important point. So we've done the veg, non-veg bit, but which was on rice. And you make a very important point here. So I'd like you to sort of, yeah, so the point you've made is that a lot of the recipes which you've used in the book typically tend to be sort of recipes for show, for display, to prove that rice is not boring, and therefore many of them sort of use basmati as a anchor, right? So there's a right chapter, but you made a very interesting point that basmati is grown largely in Punjab, where they were seen an economic opportunity, and Punjab is not a place which has as much of a supply of water as places like Assam and Bengal would have, which are more natural rice growing. And therefore you've made references to Govindovo, which is still famous about Bengalis. Ambe Mohor, I think only people in Bombay would know. Jasmine rice, probably more people in India would know about any of them. You've also spoken about Kali Jeera rice, which is used in Bangladesh now, and you've also spoken about millets. I would love to hear from the two of you, and you also that why should we go back to our roots in a sense, and why should we explore different varieties of rices more, millets more? How is that also in a way like doing your own little bit for the SDGs sustainability goals?
It's a wonderful question. So I'll say something, and Shane, you should feel free to. I mean, it's so I think that partly just some of these things were they're suited to the particular geoclimatic area, and so if we and they're also wonderful. So there's you lose nothing by using some of these other rices. So that's point number one. Point number one is we've forgotten that, and that's a bad thing to forget, because those things are actually exciting and different. The second thing is that they actually for some dishes, other rices, whatever, konok chur or something, is better for making gibat or phanabat. You want soft rices for dishes where you want the softness. But khichdi, I don't like basmati in khichdi. I think it doesn't pop.
I mean, for a bhuni at the most, but even then.
And for a bhuni, yes, but not
at the most. But Govind still makes it.
It's not the ideal rice, and so it's not even that you're getting the best effect. The effect, you're missing that, and then as we get more conscious of. And why then within rice? I mean, some of its biggest loss in Maharashtra is when I was growing up, we would get this, either bajri or jowar bhakri in my mahabari, and we would, and they were wonderful. They're really wonderful. They have so much taste, and they set off food. I wish, when I'm serving food, a lot of food, I would love to have that, especially very sharp food. The naan is just too weak a vehicle for it.
And too much volume. A naan has too much volume.
Exactly. Bhakri is thin, hard, and the hardness also gives a certain texture to the to using with the sauce. It's just spongy. I don't necessarily want spongy with it. So it really, I would love us to move back to using them, both because it's good for us and it's good for the environment. It uses very little water, but also because it just is the right, for certain dishes, it's the right thing to eat. It tastes much better.
And also maybe from a visual point of view, it's also much more exciting. It's a whole range of shapes and colors that make it less uniform. I think that's a huge point that we want to make in the cook, is that, of course, it's good for your health, good for the environment, but mostly it's just a lot of pleasure that you can take out from that. And I think both in the writing and in the illustrations, that's how I think people can get into cooking, just by realizing that in the end there's much pleasure to get out from it.
Yeah, the tone of the book is meant to be joyous.
Yes,
her illustration,
and we need a lot of that. I think that's something. Okay, I don't know. Are we supposed to decipher, like Shane caught crumble? I mean, just open this. Are we supposed to decipher, or should we not take it too literally? I just don't know how your mind was working.
I worked on the illustrations as I worked with vegetables or with ingredients. I took round, squares, triangles, geometrical forms that I chopped. I changed the colors. I changed the compositions as I would have arranged the salad, or as I would have cut pieces of vegetables. And then that's how I thought about the illustrations.
Beautiful, because it also gives a bit of creative challenge to the reader. And I like what both of you said, that when you're giving a message, not as a like in school what we used to call moral studies, and instead say that is actually fun to eat this way. And that's true. I am 47. Until 3-4 years back, I was all about steak and pork chops and this, that, and kosher mangsho. And then came in the cholesterol reports, and then came in this thing. So just but I said that I'm gonna move a bit. I'll become what they call a flexitarian, but I'm not going to have a single bad meal. So I keep experimenting and stuff, and I call them little Jack Horner meals. There's a nursery. What a good boy am I? Okay, 2 quick questions. I don't want to hold. One is everyone's wondering, why cooking to save your life? Is it to why
it's certainly not about eating particularly healthy. It's actually a book which I think is mostly healthy. Because again, it's the insistence is that you can be excited about things which are not, meat or heavy. So I think it is mostly healthy. But I don't think that's a organizing principle. So it's unhealthy, as I said, as you read out, the olive oil. Yeah,
No, that is
it's
completely by
unhealthy,
chance.
it's not meant to be a certainly not. It's more on, it's a play on the the English expression. I can't cook to save my life, and so our point is that you can, and it's just a matter of being, I think, disciplined at the beginning, so that you sort of don't experiment too early. And then once you understood what you're doing, you'll be able to experiment as well.
No, that's true. That's how it worked for me. In the beginning, it was all about recipe books, and then after that, okay, a slightly silly question. I don't know, precocious, given the fact that one, you're Bengali academic, mother was a feminist, even though not Bengali. Have you seen the movie Sholay?
Yeah.
Okay, because a lot of Bengalis have this nakuchu thing that I'll only Ray. But
I've seen it. I even promised Cheyenne that I would show it to her, but I actually never did, because there's so many movies in the world that we ended up, and we often try to watch movies that the kids would like, so we never end. But I've told her about Sholay.
Okay, role reversal. So Basanti has to dance in front of Gabbar Singh and your Viru, and you're okay with that. Sorry, not dance, but cook. But now she's saying, what should I cook? Yeah. So from this book, which is the recipe you would suggest that she cooks to save both her lives for Gabbar?
I think the Kabuli Pulao, which will be so rich that you, once you eat it, you will go to, Gabbar Singh will go to sleep and then they can sneak away. It is something very satisfying and rich, and you'll fall asleep with it, and then you quickly get out and run away.
That's talking like a good Bengali or even a Spanish person. So before I sign
non-violent strategy.
Before non-violent, this is like they say, Bengali buddhi. Punjabi like Dharmendra would have gone and put up a few killas, but Bengali will just make Kabuli Pulao. So as I sign off, I'm just going to read the introduction to Kabuli Pulao, and then I'm going to ask a question on behalf of fellow Presidency College Street folks like me. Okay, so this is what this is Kabuli Pulao, and this is Cheyenne's representation of that. I'm just reading the the introduction. An old-fashioned Indian housewife will say there always has to be a pulao at the centerpiece of a fancy dinner. This is a reliably wonderful dish. It's sweet and comforting with just a hint of spiciness to balance out the sweet. So your guests will find it to be very much to their liking. And it requires nothing really exotic, except maybe a mortar and pestle. For the mortar and pestle, get a heavy granite one with a mouth at least 5 inches wide and enough heft to do real damage if you drop it on the foot or some particularly annoying, patronizing guests. So watch out, Mr. Gabbar Singh. We Bengalis have our ways of winning. Okay, last question, which was supposed to be my introduction question for us to warm up, because I thought you were going to be this intimidating person and stuff. You're the first Nobel Prize winner I've spoken to.
I must have been wrong.
No, not because of you. I mean, you won the Nobel. It's like your. Tell me some of your college memories of food, like whether it's like, did you go to Dil Khusha? Was it Pramod Da running the canteen? Was it the YMCA thing?
So the thing that I would say I really liked, and I tried to persuade other people to go with me, but they didn't, was if you went out from Presidency College, you took a left, you crossed Harrison Road.
Okay.
On the right, there were these stalls where working class people would eat rice with fish and vegetables. Okay. And it was actually delicious. The woman there really was an excellent cook. But I couldn't get anybody to go and say, I don't want to sit there and, what to do. My professor sees me, we'll see you, you're eating food, come on. And so I was almost the only person in my cohort who would go there and regularly eat lunch whatever the vegetable of the season, some very thin dal, and a small piece of fish. But she was a very good cook, and and there was lines there to get in. So it was like, and she liked me, so I would always get
the best piece of the petit piece.
Petit much, exactly.
There would be one added complication if you were to go there now, and if you're back in college, Back to Future, that while you're balancing the plate and all that, you also have to click for Instagram. Otherwise,
fortunately, I that's your responsibility. I've absolved myself of it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Shane Olivia, the illustrator of this wonderful book, and Abhijit Banerjee, Nobel Prize winner. Who knows? Maybe the next Nobel might be for literature one day. Hopefully, the start of many, many more cookbooks. And if there's a Sholay 3, I believe there's a remake. He's given his formula of how to get over a Gabbar scene. So thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you both.
It was amazing. Thank you. It was wonderful. It was so much fun.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.